Hi, and welcome to Stagecoach Podcast. We're really excited today to be speaking with our special guest, Zachary Hanson. He is a published author with us. And Zach, let's take it away. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Zachary Hanson. As you mentioned, I'm an author of a couple of different books, a few with Dusty Saddle Publishing House, which is amazing. As you might be able to see from behind me, I live in rural Idaho. I live in a town of 35 people at the end of an 80-mile dirt road, no grocery store, no gas station. So it's a place that's ripe to develop some really interesting Western characters as I kind of dive deeper into historical fiction writing.
Great, great. What made you decide to become a writer in the first place?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. I've always been enamored with writing. I loved books as a kid. My grandfather, you know, was amazing in that he made me an offer when I was young that said, if you ever want to learn anything, it's in a book. And the one thing I will always promise you is that if you want a book to learn something, I'll buy it for you. And he always kept up with that. So I could always tap my grandfather and say, hey, I want this book on, learning about finances or this book about, writing research papers, whatever it was, he would buy it for me. It was a great relationship in that perspective. And I love him for that because he always said, read a book. So I always read books all through high school, all through undergraduate, graduate school. I was just a book nerd, but I always focused on nonfiction. I kind of had this mentality. It might be like the wrestler, the competitor in me that if I was reading something, I needed to have a tangible output. It needed to make me sleep better. I needed to have better finances. I needed to have an edge, period. So when I first got into writing my own books, it was nonfiction. The first book I ever wrote was about kind of a self-help for millennials. The second book I wrote called Turning Feral is all about moving out west, learning to hunt and trap. And then by chance, last year, my wife said, Zach, you always read nonfiction. Will you please read a fiction book with me? I kind of scoffed. I rolled my eyes. And then she's like, I'll meet you in the middle. We're going to read The Terminal List by Jack Carr. And I was like, okay. So we read it out loud to each other and it was freaking great. I loved it. It was, I learned things. I enjoyed the character development throughout. And then I was left afterwards thinking, like, what have I missed out on? And then I also had the second thought of, I think I could do that. And that's when we started rolling on the Bone Scraper series, which is what has been published with Dusty Saddle.
Oh, great. Well, so this is the Bone Scraper. We have book one and book two out, and this is going to be a series of three, right?
Yep.
Fantastic book. I just absolutely love it. And in fact, I read it and then had to go purchase my own copy because I loved it so much. You do an amazing amount of research for your book, I can tell. So tell us a little bit about your research and about your main character, Jesse.
Yeah. So, first off, I appreciate that compliment. I'm very glad that you enjoyed the books. But to answer your question, the research kind of fell in my lap. So I had gotten done reading that first fiction series and thought, man, I should do something. I've always been a big fan of Westerns, Louis L'Amour, um, really anything in that genre. And I now live in a town of 35 people in the middle of nowhere that was founded in 1864. So I befriended in our town one of the 35 people, a guy named Kerry Mooseman. He runs the Atlanta Historical Society because this town actually pulled more gold out of it than the entire 49 gold rush in California did in its existence. And at one point, there was 2,000 people living in what is our 35 person a year town now. That was mostly Chinese immigrant workers that were coming over from the railroad. So it's just this area just steeped in history that not many people dig into except for this one individual. So prior to writing the book, to get a little bit of, character ideas, I sat with him for about 3 weeks in his archives, in his little shop, and he took me through everything, old pictures, the names of individuals from Chinese merchants to, Mexicans that were coming through to individuals that ran the brothels in town. It was just this steep learning curve of everything that happened right here in central Idaho in the 1860s. And then what sprung Jesse, our main protagonist and character, was a bit of a few of the people he had mentioned to me in our research and our discussions. But my great great grandfather, Jesse Ironweight, was from Georgia, which is where I'm originally from in the South. After the Civil War, he decided, like most people, to go out west for a little while and seek fortune. And he made his way up through Colorado, dipped into Idaho for a little bit through his journals, but ultimately never struck it rich. And obviously didn't stick around like Jesse Waite does in the book, but came back to Georgia and became a furniture maker and had a great family. And obviously, you know, built a family to ultimately have me way down the line, which is pretty awesome. But it was a mixture of both my great great grandfather's real life adventure, as well as a little bit of a mix in of true history from this area to create Jesse Wade.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, well, one of the things I love about your writing is every single chapter leaves you hanging. Like you can't, you have the type of book that you sit down to read and nothing else in your day matters until the book is done because you don't want to put it down. So, you know, very, very great writing skills. When is number 3 coming out?
Oh boy, it's been an interesting journey because book one was all based on local history here. I had easy access. The story was right there. It was great. Book two, and I'm keeping everything in Idaho with Idaho history around the time and researching it well, happens down in the Owyhee Mountains, which is essentially southwest of Boise in the kind of the forgotten corner of Idaho, but it's where Silver City, there were a lot of Indian wars happen. And I went down, did more research before book two, wrote book two, had a great time with it, got it out. Now, book three is happening up near Yellowstone about 10 years after book two. So, what is happening is it's taking a lot of research, and the area that I've chosen to place the book is a little dearth on history, meaning it's a history rich area, but from an actual chronicling or having a local museum, it's a little harder to come by. So, I've made 2 trips up to Yellowstone already in the past 2 months. I have a pretty good idea of the story, where I want to take it, but I'm waiting for a few more pieces. But the book will be out before the end of the year. And I'm hoping that in the next month or two, I can really sit down and just hammer out the story, get it on paper, and then start to kind of creep through the editing process.
Oh, that's great. I really look forward to that one. Um, do you have an idea in mind yet? And you don't have to say it, but do you have an idea in mind yet of the next series?
Oh boy. So I thought that question was going differently. I thought you were going to ask what was going to happen in the third book, and the answer is yes. And I had kind of a little bit of a toothy grin because it should be pretty juicy and you know hopefully a good twist. But to answer your question about the next series, I don't know. I want to continue writing. I want to continue writing in this genre. There's just so much that's happened in Idaho, from the Basque people coming over from Spain to run sheep in this country, to the Peruvians who then came later down the line, and just really helped build our state of Idaho up in a really just pure Western way. As much as you can say, it's about as Western as you get. So I'm toying around with a few ideas, but I don't have anything solid for the next series yet. But I'm sure something will come.
I'm sure it will. Um, Tell us a little bit about your other book. Let's see, I have it right here. It's called Turning Feral. And this is the first book I read of yours and just fell in love with it. To me, even being a woman and reading about your adventures and learning how to hunt and learning how to trap, and I felt like I could just absolutely relate to it as well. And I'm sure that men especially are going to be drawn to this book, but I really think women will be too. And I just love the whole story behind it, where you came from, and then how you got to that point. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Turning Feral is my second nonfiction, but this is all about my journey out west and to getting to where I'm sitting right now in this little town in Idaho that sparked the Bone Scraper series. It is my journey, really spiritually, about being a tech executive. So my career path went from undergraduate. I worked overseas in the Intel space for a few years, living in Russia, Kyrgyzstan, Georgia, Saudi Arabia, came back stateside, started an entrepreneurial journey, failed at that, and then went into big tech. And I've been working in artificial intelligence for the past 10 years. But the book chronicles my kind of general, slow, creeping vision that this isn't a life I want to live. This white picket fence, always on an airplane, going city to city. It felt hollow. And then I went through an unexpected divorce, and I kind of just had this a catalytic event in my life where I just said, where do I go? And I'm turned to the woods. It wasn't something that I had experience in, but I just went out there. I found a cabin where I'm sitting right now and decided, hey, as an adult, I want to learn to hunt. I want to learn to find my own food. I want to learn to trap. I want to be able to make clothes out of furs. I want to learn to garden. All these things that I had been told are not the appropriate thing to do. You should be seeking big paying careers, things like that. I was like, that's not the ticket. And that's what this book is about. It's my journey, and it's steeped in a lot of humor and a lot of really just self-reflection at, like, I don't know anything, and I'm throwing myself at the feet of people who know more than me to teach me. And that's what the book's about. And that's why I think it is the only book in my collection so far that's hit the bestseller list multiple times. But it's a fun read. It's really a reflection on myself and just kind of being as honest as I can be about that journey, which continues to be challenging every day.
I believe that's so true. When you're homesteading, which is what, you really are doing, you are the essence of being a homesteader. My gosh, everything.
Yeah. And
You're in charge of everything.
yeah. And Ginger, you know this too. We had to reschedule this interview, what, 2 times? And one of those times, or maybe both, was because we ran out of water. We went to turn our faucet on in a cabin. There's no water, and we have 2 young children who need baths. We have to clean bottles, and the consequences are always exacerbated when you live so far away. You don't have easy access to a grocery store or anything else. So it is challenging, to say the least.
Well, you know what, we're kind of skipping around here a little bit, but I want to talk a little bit more about the bone scraper. And one of the things that's very interesting about this book is Jesse's decision to not only be a man of God, but to be a man of, retribution and revenge. And so talk about that a bit.
Yeah, I think this is probably the dichotomy that most men and women I know, my ex-wife was an FBI special agent, so she was on the front lines of, you know, good and evil every day. And I think that aspect of being a godly man, but also not being afraid to take action that needs to be taken to protect those who can't protect themselves, is the essence of Jesse Waite as I wrote it in the book. And I think it's something that we as a modern people, especially those who live in big cities or those who have grown up in the sphere of, behave, go to school, get your degree, go to work, be nice, be nice. It's a little bit of we forgot where we came from, right? And that's one of the things I think most people love about Westerns is you have these characters who protect the weak, and they're not afraid to stand up for those who can't protect themselves. And getting to rope that dichotomy of being godly, but also being quite violent when needed was an interesting twist. Now, what I do think is interesting and what I'd push the reader on a little bit is to say, is that okay? Because, you've read the book, Ginger, you've read book 2. There's a fine line, and I don't know if Jesse's crossing it, right? And, is it for pleasure and sport to a certain degree versus just protecting the weak. And I think that's up to the reader to decide, but starting to test and play with those boundaries is what I wanted to do, to have people question, like, he's a good guy, but is he, or is he not? And to have that internal dialogue.
Mhm. Well, absolutely. And I've got to say, as I was reading the books, I often thought, you've got your character portrayal is just amazing with him. And so I often thought about that as I was reading it. Um, Tell me a little bit about, I noticed I think it was in the back of Turning Feral, you mentioned something about an outfitter guide organization that you're doing. Are you doing that now? And what's that about?
Yeah. So as I've gone on my journey, right, from tech exec to pseudo outdoorsman or budding outdoorsman, to author, this whole arc has kind of been about finding my passion areas. In Turning Feral, I talk about artificial intelligence tech. It's a great industry. It's very interesting, but is my heart and passion there? I don't know. Parts of me are, parts of me aren't. So as I've gone on this arc, I've really dove into writing because I find joy in that. Like, I wake up every morning to write the Bone Scraper and these other books, and I'm happy, I'm excited, and that is awesome. And to find something similar that will pay my bills is fantastic. So I did start a company called the Outfitter.Guide. It's essentially blending my technology experience with my now experience being an outdoorsman, hunting, trapping, and it's bringing pretty much a customer management system to outfitters. Outfitters being those who take folks from back east or overseas on hunts out here in the West to hunt elk, deer, bear, whatever their target is, but giving those outfitters just a simple online platform where they can log their hunts, do all their payments automatically, because it's a bit of an antiquated industry. So most people are using legal pads and sticky notes. So this is just an attempt to kind of bring them up, into the new tech sphere, to a degree, and all part of my journey of hopefully just being fully in the outdoor industry, writing full time over the next 5 to 10 years.
Oh, excellent. And how do people find you? I mean, I know your books are available on Amazon, so we can do a search on Amazon. We're going to have, actually, we're starting with The Bone Scraper, the first book, here on the podcast. Our listeners will be able to listen to the full-length audiobook and then go to Amazon and purchase the series. But how do we find you? Do you have a Facebook page, or how do we find your outfitting software as well?
Yep. I'll go down the list. So as I said in the book, I was really adamant about bucking the social media system. That was led to a lot of my disdain with the industry as a whole. But I am learning that it is a necessary part of putting yourself out there. So there's a couple different ways. Frankly, my most active social media is my LinkedIn. People can search me, Zachary Hanson, on LinkedIn. You'll see me with a big cowboy hat. It's the same headshot I have on the back of the book. I do have a Facebook. You can also find me there, Zachary Hanson. You'll see the Turning Feral banner and the Bone Scraper banner on it. I am starting an Instagram page. It's called @LetMeDieLearning, which is a Substack that I run, which is all about learning how to trap, hunt, be more mechanical, things like that. So similarly, my Substack is @LetMeDieLearning. So Instagram, Substack, @LetMeDieLearning. Otherwise, Zachary Hanson on both LinkedIn and Facebook.
Okay, great. Well, we will look you up, and also I'll put links to those things in the comments section below on the podcast. And well, it looks like we are getting a little bit close to your time deadline. So we have 5 minutes left. What would you like to tell us about your books?
And it was a blast to write, is the most important thing. I like to say that it's a mixture of Louis L'Amour meets Quentin Tarantino. So if you're looking for a book that is a true Western based on real history, but has, I would say, probably extreme violence, then this is going to be the book series for you. But it has a very strong undertone and undercurrent of heartfelt story across both books and going to the third. So if that sounds up your alley, check out the Bone Scraper series. And I do want to give a big thanks to Ginger. You've been at my side from day one with Dusty Saddle, and you've been great to work with. And anybody else out there who's looking to write their own books, reach out to Ginger, reach out to the team at Dusty Saddle. I know they're always looking for other great Westerns to add to their catalog.
Well, thank you, Zachary. You've been such a pleasure to work with and such a pleasure to interview. This has been great. And I'd love to have you back on the podcast again. So we'll after our listeners get a chance to listen to the Bone Scraper, then maybe we can have a little bit of a question answer type of an interview where they can write in questions and you can answer them or something like that.
Perfect. Well, I look forward to it. Maybe we can coincide that with the release of book 3. So anytime.
That'd be great. Well, thank you so much, Zachary, and we'll be hearing from you soon.
Perfect. Thank you, Ginger.
Thank you.